Hi everyone and welcome back to War Thunder Tutorials. Today we're going to talk about urban maps of War Thunder and how to properly fight on those maps. The first urban map to appear in game was Poland. A bit later, another much bigger urban map was added called Eastern Europe, followed by two more, Berlin and Normandy. Naturally, each map has its own unique aspects. The town on the Poland map is quite small, but it plays a key role in any arcade battle. But the capture points present in realistic and simulator battles are placed outside the town. In the latter two modes, the town plays a support role, providing massive cover to use for flank attacks and a well-protected vantage point offering good concealment. Looking at it, the developers have decided that the urban map experiment was a success, and the following urban map, Eastern Europe, is decidedly very urban. Almost every capture point on the map is located deep within narrow streets of a town. The map itself is somewhat reminiscent of Saving Private Ryan, where a group of US paratroopers were battling in Normandy. Which brings us to a map of the very same name, Normandy, where you will be able to play around a recreated portion of an Allied D-Day beach landing in France. Here, you will see an abundance of sandy beaches, artillery, barrage balloons, and exciting combat within the town located just above the said beach. Although here, the battles will not be centered around the town like in Poland, and will not be exclusively set inside the town, as in Eastern Europe. In Normandy, you can flank through nearby villages or make a daring push through the bridge to capture the enemy base. In other words, this map presents you with a huge selection of tactical options to work with. Finally, there's Berlin, a map that is constantly locked in brutal tank combat amidst the rubble-strewn capital of World War II Germany. The smoke from the destroyed city will hinder your view of the enemy. A scorched square in front of the Reichstag can quickly become a graveyard to any tank trying to rush it. Okay, now let's define the basics of urban combat. If you fail to follow these rules, you will be hard-pressed to be of any use in battles in these environments. Rule number 1. Never rush without first doing recon. Urban combat is defined by numerous and very deadly side streets and treacherous turns where behind each one there can be an enemy waiting to kill you. The only notable exclusion from this rule is rushing right after the game begins, when you can assume a good position early on and prepare an ambush for the advancing enemy. Rule number 2. Always try and limit the number of possible threats to a minimum. Imagine this, for example. You are guarding a crossroads and it seems that you got it all covered. But in reality, you're wide open. Just think about it. You have 4 ways from which you can be attacked from, 3 of which are not in your immediate line of sight. To avoid these threats, just roll back a little and you should have 2 more approaches in your line of sight. This will make it easier for you to react to threats from the set approaches, but you're still quite vulnerable from the front and rear. Well, to be honest, your rear is supposed to be protected by your teammates, if you're lucky that is, while your front is most certainly for you to watch and cover. Rule number 3. Try and avoid open terrain such as town squares. This rule expands rule number 2, but we can't stress this enough. Many a player will try and cross open ground while being targeted by the enemy. Use open terrain only when you have no other choice, especially when you require to capture a point or cross a bridge to advance. Rule number 4. Remember about the role of all ground vehicle classes in battle, because in an urban combat this is especially important. First up is heavy tanks. Any heavy should hold key approaches and roads while inside the town. Heavies must also be used to punch through the enemy defenses, absorbing most punishment and then proceed to hold capture points. Given their inherent low speed, heavy tanks should avoid engaging enemies located on narrow side streets, where they can be easily ambushed by much faster medium tanks. Moving on to medium tanks. Their primary role in any city fight is flank attack and control of all side streets and alleys. High speed and decent weaponry of a medium tank allow it to covertly penetrate the enemy defenses and seize capture points, all the while shooting at the enemy through narrow alleyways. The main agenda for a medium tank in any town is moving non-stop. A medium tank that is stationary for too long is next to useless in urban combat. SPGs play a vital support role in urban battles, but given the lack of turrets on most SPGs, they must operate and deal damage from behind the main lines. If you're playing on Eastern Europe, for example, there's a good position around fuel tanks located in the north side of the town, in addition to a highly advantageous hill surrounding this position. From there, you will be able to see one of the main roads clear as day. AAAs, best stay near SPGs and keep an eye out for daring air raids, but please try and avoid enemy tankers to stay alive longer. Now, let's talk general tactics for each urban map. If you're playing an arcade battle in Poland, we strongly advise you not to rush the central capture point. That point is wide open, and every player going for it will inevitably be caught in crossfire. Try and assume flanking positions around it and find yourself some cover there. There are few approaches to attack the set positions, so a proper defensive line can hold out for a long time there. The same thing can be used in Conquest and Domination. Take up the same position, fortify it, grind the enemy, and finally win the match. To be fair, if you're playing realistic or simulator, the gameplay is more difficult. The map expands beyond the town, so you will be better off fighting for control of the hill across the lake, which will provide very good view of the town below. Eastern Europe's layout actively promotes players to engage each other in the town. The spawn points on this one are located in different spots, depending on the match, but the overall picture of battle stays similar. There are two key highways going through the town, bordering the river on both sides. These roads are where the battles begin almost every time, then combat gradually shifts towards side streets and the embankment. Don't forget about fuel tanks up north. It will be hard to get to them and even harder to defend. If you're playing alone, then going there is not the best idea. So only ever assume that position with the help from a decent team. Normandy, just as Poland, is a very dynamic map, whatever the game mode or match. Most of the action is happening at loop roads and central square. The shoreline and patches of trees can be used for diversions and flank attacks. The skies are filled with barrage balloons, making bombing this place all the harder for aircraft. The main rule for this map is not to rush forward and check your corners. You never know where the enemy may be hiding this time. Berlin is one of the most difficult and treacherous maps in the game. There are few buildings that can be used as solid cover, while abundant ruins make for perfect ambush spots. The central capture point looks very inviting if you can cross the river, which is normally a death trap. The early fight for the Reichstag and the Kroll Opera will inevitably shift to duels from across the map, where the aforementioned capture point will always be in sight of some player. Take it only towards the end of the match if your team is clearly gaining the upper hand. We also need to mention a specific game mode called Break that adds a couple of surprises to urban battles. Break is similar to Conquest, but here you will have to seize capture point twice. The main catch in an urban setting is that enemy respawn might appear right next to where you just captured a point. In other words, the enemy might appear behind your back. So as soon as you capture one point, go straight for the other, until the enemy can mount a counteroffensive. All in all, urban combat is not for the faint of heart, especially in simulator mode, where a battle has you on your toes from first second to the last. Should you memorize these basics of urban warfare though, then these maps might become your favorites for ground warfare or War Thunder. This is it for today. Stay tuned folks. War Thunder Tutorials signing out.